courage and a lot of negotiations in order, to promote, free trade agreement, intra-regional trade. And I think also there's one key thing that I wanted to bring here is the business actors. Do they know about the free trade agreement? I'm sure there are a lot of actors who have no mere knowledge about the opportunities and about the challenges of the free trade agreement. So what are the measures that are done at the procedural level, at the administrative level, at the technical level to accompany African investors in order to implement this free trade agreement?
Thank you, Karima. Now let me bring in Mr. Taylor. European Union. What lessons can the continental free trade area learn from the European Union, especially with Brexit going out? We've seen what's been happening since they voted to stay out of the European Union. So many challenges. Perhaps sometimes when I reflect, I say, oh, if they had told the British people that this will happen, or if they have another referendum tomorrow, they may say, no, leave us there. But I'm not from the UK, so I don't know. So you give us your own perspectives.
Thank you, Nancy. One of the speakers doing Google Messages earlier here this morning said that until the lion tells his story, the story will always be told by the hunter. I think he was speaking to me. So I'm not going to tell you what lessons you should learn. Right? I think you have very distinct speakers and guests here from the African Union and so on. I think you will learn your own lessons. What I can share with you is some of the experiences that we have seen in the European Union, and from that you will draw your own conclusions. But let's start with Brexit. It's a mess. It's also a proof that if you don't bring everybody along in the journey with you, there will be people that will be dissatisfied, and they will even shoot themselves in the feet because they're unhappy. I don't think anybody now that follows the Brexit story can really see what the advantages for the majority of the people in Britain from leaving a very well-established trading pattern. But it's so ingrained in there now that the decisions are taken which will have an impact. We've seen in the press here in Nigeria that there will be an economic impact here. That may be exaggerated from the media, but we know even within the EU that investors, they like stability. And when you have an unstable situation like the Brexit talks, it leads to disturbances of the market, and that has a negative impact eventually on the economy. And that will be felt even as far away as Nigeria. When people talk about the consequences of Brexit here, my personal belief is that it will not have such an impact on a country like Nigeria in terms of its trade with Europe. But there are other countries in Africa that have preferential trade agreements, our famous economic partnership agreements, where that trade will be affected enormously. Where you have countries, for example in Southern Africa, that send most of their exports to Europe via the UK, from day to day, if there is a no-deal Brexit, that preferential trade pattern will be cut off, and that has enormous consequences. Now, what does that say for the African free trade area? It shows that if you don't have the preferential trade regime, trade is much more difficult. And when you establish a successful trading regime, it really links everybody very closely together. And the whole problem with Brexit, in fact, is how to unravel that relationship in a sensible way. And I think there, it's not necessarily a lesson for you, but it is certainly something that your heads of state and your negotiators really need to take on board. How far are you prepared to close up your relationship? How far are you prepared to give up sovereignty to build that trading relationship? I think in Nigeria, there is a very open debate about that. Whether it's trade relations with the EU or within ECOWAS or at the level of the African Union. But there's no free dinner here. If you want a preferential trade regime, which will have overall positive benefit for the economies of the African states, there is a price to pay, and that starts off with your own sovereignty. But that's a whole other area of discussion. Thank you.
I understand where you're coming from, but we'll see if we can interrogate that further. Senator Shehu Sani, what do you have to say? Especially you that have the CSO's background. And I also do know that even as we pursue after, it also has to be domesticated. Our national assemblies or our parliaments will need to work on it. Do you think that perhaps, because I've also heard different thoughts from different divides. No, we don't support after. For example, I was speaking with a senator, was it 2 weeks ago? Nancy, how can you be supporting this? I said, Senator, I'm not one of the leaders that went to do this stuff. He was of the view, no, you see what is happening? Nigeria may just be the Brexit for after. So it got me thinking that perhaps, do we have everyone on board, especially from the parliament, and also the CSOs, which you were part of before you entered the Nigerian Senate?
Thank you very much. Well, all has been said, a lot has been said about the African trade-free area. But I think what we need to remind ourselves is that the idea of integrating the continent economically is not a new one. It is imbibed in the articles and clauses and writings, statements of our founding fathers in Africa. We go through writings and speeches of Haile Selassie, Kwame Nkrumah, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Ahmed Sékou Touré. You can see how they succinctly predicted that our future as a continent is tied to each other. So the idea of an African free trade area came after we have come to the realization that all that we have attempted to do in the last 5 decades have failed. In the last 5 decades, we have seen how we struggle to find our footings and future by relationships that are outside of the continent. We tried our marriages with the IMF, it failed. The World Bank, it failed. And some of our Francophone allies, too, aligned themselves with France, thinking that all will deliver the future they so desire. So the idea of an African free trade area is coming back to that very reality, that our destiny and our future is tied to each other. But there are challenges that we have to be ready to face, one of which is the one we are experiencing in the country today. You can't sign an African free trade area, then close your borders. I don't know how to call black white. That is my own. And you also have to tell yourself that if we are desirous of building a new economic future for our continent, then we have to sacrifice some of our irrelevant relationships with nations that are outside of our country. And on this, I believe that signing is one thing, and following to the latter, all the requisites of those papers we sign is another. So I believe a conversation like this will ignite and encourage those who are empowered with the levers of power to see to it that those things we have signed on paper come to life.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now, I would give Dr. Dikbolu to respond, because you came in and you came out to face the government of Nigeria to say, why close your borders when we've signed the African Continental Free Trade Area? Like I said in my opening speech, this is an African family meeting. Let's talk to ourselves. Dr. Dikbolu, why are the borders closed? And the president has said it will be open in 2020. It will be closed till 2020, rather.
Just to say that that statement is presented to the Customs Service and they denied it. But it's a very good question. But I have a very straightforward answer. The simple answer, the very simple one, which is not relevant, but I cannot resist saying it, is that we have signed, we have not ratified. But more importantly, the AfCFTA is trying to introduce a rules-based trading system in Africa. Now, the very people who have already signed previous agreements with Nigeria on customs cooperation, on the rules that will affect transit of goods, are not living to those obligations. So, you are not following on the things you have signed to, but you want to hold me on to the things I have just signed to. So what you will then have is that I will sign on to the AfCFTA, and you will continue to do these things you are doing to undermine my economy, smuggling, dumping. You will continue to do them because I've signed the AfCFTA. But you have not recognized the agreements, the various agreements that we have signed under ECOWAS, under the Cotonou agreement, I think it is, that regulates the trade between us and our neighbors. You have not signed on to them. You signed on to them, but you are not observing them. But now you are asking me to observe new rules. So I think it's a very good opportunity for us to remind everybody that all obligations should be adhered to. How do you explain? And I really don't want to use the example because of my background, but I have to. How do you explain a situation in which Nigeria increased tariffs on rice in 2013, and since then the export of rice to Benin has been 500% since 2013 of parboiled rice which they do not eat? How do you explain that Benin, with a population that cannot compete with my hometown, exports second highest importer of rice after China? How do you explain a situation in which there are agreements that have been signed? It's not the first time the border has been closed. President Obasanjo closed the border. Benin came to the table, signed the agreement with us, and observed that agreement. Then after a while, they dropped the agreement. So I think it's an opportunity for us to say that when you sign up to things, let us all observe what we sign up to, and let it not only be that when we show you that there can be a reaction, that you now say that you signed it and you are not observing the rules. What are the ones you signed up to, you're not observing yourselves? I think we must tell ourselves the truth in Africa. We sign for rule-based trade, we must observe rule-based trade. The beauty for me of the AfCFTA is that in addition to those rules on customs cooperation, those rules on transit management, there is a dispute settlement mechanism. ECOWAS doesn't have a dispute settlement mechanism of that sort. But I should be able to go somewhere and say, you are undermining my economy. Which country in the world, anybody in the audience that's willing to take on, allows people to dump into their economy and just say, we're happy? Where? There must be some sense of national interest in our relationship with other states, no matter how much we love the Pan-African project. I mean, so that's the point. So I love trade, I know trade leads to growth, but we're now talking about the establishment of a rule-based trading system. And so we must all observe the rules and not just call only on Nigeria to observe the rules.
Okay, Dr. Dikbolu, what I will just take in summary, I'm going back to my science background. One of the forces in physics, to every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So perhaps that's it from Nigeria. Senator Shitani, I don't know if that from Dr. Dikbolu answers your question. I'll go back to you a bit. Professor Jerome, what we're talking about now is one of the challenges, Nigeria closing its borders and saying for other countries that are bordered with Nigeria, for us to have rules-based trading system. But what other challenges are we seeing with the CFTA that may likely come? especially even as we see the European Union as the only example right now that we're seeing. What are the challenges, and what are the solutions to those challenges quickly?
Thank you, Nancy. I think added to the point you have made about border closure, you should add the xenophobia in South Africa. And these are some of the biggest countries in Africa. This is the reality of the situation. Before we engage in this over-celebratory mode, I normally remind people, to go back to their international economics class. We used to teach University of Ibadan. Free trade is one of the several stages as you move towards liberalization. It is just number 2 after preferential trade agreement. You still have sequential series of stages. Customs union, from there you move to common market, then from common market to economic union, where the EU is now. Then if you take like what the East African community wants, they want to have a political union. Then you have a political union before finally you get to the complete economic integration. So it's good to celebrate, but stage 2 is not good enough. But if you look at the different regs, there was a very important question you asked. Not all the regs are not at the same level. On behalf of African Consultancy Building Foundation, I actually led a team of consultants to visit all the regs to assess what they are and their capacity imperatives. Many of them don't have the requisite capacity. The most successful now is the East African community. They are doing very well. ECOWAS is number 2. You find that ECOWAS has even surpassed the stage where we are now, which is the free trade. They're already in the aspect of customs union. But why is it that fundamentally very many of these rates are not working? The major aspect is finance. Our heads of states are not paying their bills. And there are many reasons for that. The first is multiple membership. You have something called the spaghetti bowl. If you look at the way African countries are members of the international economic communities. I think Kenya is the back. Kenya is a member of 5 out of the 8 recognized regs. So what part of what this free trade agreement will do is to help us harmonize and remove the distortions. But there are a number of disadvantages or challenges along the line. Let me just list them. The first one is that if you look at what has actually registered trade in Africa, tariff is just one of the obstacles, but they are not the major ones. The major ones are non-tariff barriers. I'm happy that our military people are here. Just take a trip to Benin Republic. There are at least about 18 different checkpoints there. There is no way this one is going to stop. It can only improve. But those are the major challenges which you have to counter. Followed with the lack of infrastructure. Free trade is not going to solve your infrastructure problems. Like I mentioned earlier, if you look at a map of Africa, 16 countries outright are landlocked, which means they are not linked to the sea. Because about 80% of trade in Africa, or I think 90%, is carried by sea, maritime, which is where the seas are very important. You find Mombasa and others serving the other ports. But there is a lot of inefficiency in these ports. The only port that is efficient in Africa is the Durban port in South Africa. Even then, Durban port is one of the most expensive ports in the whole world. So there are several challenges you have to counter. Only 12% of our roads are paved. So how are you going to compete? And even when you talk of free trade, we try to look at the composition of trade by Africans. You find that invariably the trade is going to be in processed products. Because currently, we are spending about $63 billion to import food, what we can do in Africa. But many of these food imports, they are processed foods. So if you are going to have a share of the market, you have to find a way to produce. The supply side factors are very, very important. If you don't produce, there's no way you can compete. And in the case of Nigeria, there's no way you can compete by producing with generators. So you need to really sit tight and find out how you can take advantage. major challenge which I'm going to mention is some of the factors, the political factors that have created against trade. The leadership. You find a situation where many of them come to the African Union, very good deliberation, they sign those things, and they forget about them. There is no way these things are transmitted to the country. There's a wide gulf. I work with the African Union, but I will tell you the truth. We've been to the European Union, they do this properly. At African Union, there is no way for you to sit there and ask yourself, the decisions that were taken last year, how many of them have been implemented? So that was why some of us who say there should be a moratorium, no more conferences, no more seminars. Just go and implement what you've agreed before. Africa will move forward.
Thank you, Prof. I think perhaps you just ended our session. Let's go now. But you've said a lot of critical things, and even as you enumerated the challenges, you've also given the solutions. We must get our infrastructure right. We must get our policies right. And Karima did say something, not political will, but political courage. Not just political will. Let me tell you this, our experience as we are planning this conference for those 3 days. Of course, we expected a lot of delegates from other African countries, like the Kenya High Commissioner told you. The Deputy President of Kenya was supposed to be here with us today, if not of states events. One of our delegates from Cotonou was supposed to come here. And when we were, okay, perhaps my partner told you, the ticket from Cotonou to this place, just guess, close to 500,000 naira. Just Cotonou. Cotonou here. Yes. 500,000 naira to come to Nigeria. So when my partner told me, I was like, I was so infuriated that it's even costlier to come from Cotonou than to come from US or the UK. So are we really serious? Karima, please.
Actually, I heard about it. I think this is one of the issues not only business people are facing, but I think all the different actors and stakeholders are facing to come to Africa. And I want to raise your attention about two important messages here. First of all is mobility. We're talking about free trade agreement, we're talking about economic partnership, but we're putting a lot of obstacles in terms of goods and services and also people mobility. So, first of all, you talked about the closing of borders. How would we do a free trade agreement if, because of the so many conflicts between different African countries, they're closing borders? This is an important problem. And also, we've been hearing a lot of initiatives, nice initiatives like African passports, visa facilitations, regional passports, but unfortunately, these initiatives have stayed in political discourse, but not translated into political actions. And from here, I would like to pledge an important request to sign a 1 million signature petition to reduce the tariffs of airlines, because it is part of the African Union 2063 agenda, and it is very shameful that in some destinations, regardless of the efforts that have been done by certain airlines, that we have to travel to another continent to come to Africa, and then we have to pay an imaginary cost of money, to travel into African countries. So this is really a pledge that we have to advocate for changing these policies. Second, I think in terms of capacity building, I think this free trade agreement should benefit small, medium enterprises. What have we prepared for them to enter new markets, to face the economic giants, and at the same time to survive the competition? This is first, because I think we are today in the age of digitalization, artificial intelligence, monetary transformation, the rise of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, etc. So what are we doing in terms of that? And the last point that I wanted to bring here is about the increase of taxation of goods and services. There are many small and medium enterprises who are, exporting to African countries, but actually now they have to stop because of the increase of taxation. The last point is the local products. What are we doing to develop value chains, to valorize our local products? If we want to have African solutions, African trades done by Africans with Africans, we have to start doing policies and strategies to valorize our local products.
Mr. Taylor, the European Union, of course, is the world's most deeply integrated single market we're seeing right now, if not of the Brexit issue that you're seeing. How did you get to that point of integration? And of course, just like Professor Jerome had said, there are different stages. The EU is, of course, at the economic union. There are a lot of stages, the customs union and all of that. How did you get to that point that the EU is the mostly integrated single market right now in the world? Perhaps if the CFTA is done, we'll definitely overtake you.
Thank you, Nancy. I love your answers. There's no quick answer to that. I think anybody who's interested in the EU will know that from just after the Second World War, so back in the late 1940s, the early 1950s, which is 70 years ago now, they started talking about what we now call the European Union. The first thing we had was a customs union. Now, full disclosure to the audience today, I am a customs officer, or I used to be, so that's where I come from. So I'm very proud to say that the whole European Union is very much based on a customs union. Now, if you want to read that across to the African free trade area, that is your starting point. Are you prepared in Africa to go that far? When you talk to the African Union, there are all sorts of policy areas which leads to things like the customs union. But it's a very big step. And in my opening intervention, I talked about the political will, the loss of sovereignty. For the European Union to have a customs union, it meant that trade policy left capitals and went to Brussels. Right? It's very difficult for people outside Europe maybe to understand the effect of that. But if we go back to the Brexit story, we have a situation where one of our member states, the United Kingdom, has not had to negotiate trade agreements or trade matters since it joined the European Union. And now they have to develop that expertise all over again. And it has a massive impact. So the lessons or the way we did it in Europe is we started with the customs union. And all these other initiatives to bring our citizens closer together came from that starting point. The other element I think I should share with you, but again, I don't know how it reads across to the African story, is what we have done for our, let's say, our vulnerable regions. We have a regional policy in Europe. In other words, money goes into Brussels, and then it is shared out to the poorer communities. Again, if you look at the UK, it's my pet subject at the moment, there are parts of the UK that are much wealthier than others. Of course, the southeast of England, with its banking and everything else, is very wealthy. But there are other parts of the UK which are much poorer, like Scotland, and they have benefited significantly from regional funds. And that brings me back to the element I tried to highlight at the start. If you don't bring everybody along that journey, you will have dissatisfaction. If you have countries in Africa that are benefiting very well from a free trade arrangement, but you have other countries that are not benefiting, you will not have a successful outcome. And when you have a situation, as we've heard in Nigeria, where you are suggesting that other countries are not following the rules, of course that is a problem as well. In the EU, we are very strong advocates of rules-based trade. We are very strong advocates of the WTO. I know that may not be quite so popular in Africa. I see my colleague smiling beside me. All right? But for us in the EU, we believe that trade can only work properly and fairly if it's based on rules that are agreed by everybody in the system. And when you look at the African Free Trade Area, you have a wonderful opportunity there to develop your own rules. I know that you're still working out the details of things like rules of origin, the market access offers from one country to another. But it's incredibly important there. I mean, you already talked about dispute settlement, I think, earlier this morning. But for me, what's really important is that you have sufficient measures on safeguards. So you talked about SMEs, right? You have to protect your SMEs. If somebody in this country launches a new product, but can't compete even on its own market because of cheap imports, it's never going to get work. And in most trade agreements, certainly all the trade agreements that the EU has signed up to, we always have safeguard measures in place. I've come from Southern Africa, where we have a trade agreement between the EU and the SADC countries. And there are several safeguard measures precisely to protect the African SMEs to develop their products. And I think that is something that you must have inside your own free trade area. Thank you.
Okay, our sixth panelist is here, Dr. Imasen. Dr. Imasen is a lecturer at Bayes University, Abuja. Please, a round of applause as he joins us at the podium. While he takes time to settle down, let me come to Senator Shehu Sadi. Can all African countries compete equally? Because if you're looking at even the African continent right now, you're talking of not more than 5-6 economies. In fact, if you're talking about 2, perhaps Nigeria as the biggest economy on the continent, and South Africa as the most advanced or industrialized country on the African continent. You're also taking a look at parts like Egypt and all of that. And like I said in my opening speech, we have about 5 to 6 fastest growing economies in the world here in Africa. So it beats me really why all this pervasiveness of hunger, poverty and all of that, still, we're still colored by it. With this CFTA, can all African countries compete equally that an Equatorial Guinea, for example, will not feel threatened with Nigeria?
Thank you for that. First of all, we need to understand that there is a difference between richer countries converging and poorer countries converging. When richer countries converge, is to preserve their wealth and become richer. When poor countries converge, to see how they can escape from poverty, at the same time protect their economy. In our case, the idea of the free trade area is to, I believe, address some of these differences within ourselves. And the pessimistic aspect of it was the revelation made by my brother here, how leaders converge in Addis Ababa and have problems later in terms of implementation of those agreements they signed. So on this, I believe that if the follow-up committee that was set up by the free trade area can work assiduously on this. First and foremost, institutions like the customs, immigration, the drug law enforcement agencies, and other security apparatus of the states that are at the borders, if they can be well funded and equipped, I believe some of these fears we have raised as far as the free trade zone can be squarely addressed. I insisted that in as much as we want to protect our economy, we always have to put consideration to the importance of our own neighbors. I know we locked down our economy with borders for rights, but our neighbors in the Northeast are suffering from problems that comes from our country. Thousands and hundreds of thousands of our people are in Cameroon, they are in Chad, they are in Niger Republic. So, if for your rights they send back those people down here, how are you going to feel? Neighborliness has its own imperatives. Small-scale industries need to be protected. But I believe the rules that are there in the free trade zones makes provisions to ensure that some of these institutions of the state takes care of this. For the poorer countries in Africa, I believe this is an opportunity for them to also see how this kind of cooperation will uplift their own status from what they are. The sub-regional bodies, the ECOWAS, the SADC, and the East African Community have their own challenges, but to a greater extent, they have also worked. And they have been able to do what they can. It's better than not having them. So the 0 point about all that we are discussing here is on how religiously we can implement. I've seen the documents of AfCFTA. How that can be implemented will be dependent on an efficient custom and immigration service, well-funded and well-equipped to work. No matter what we do, as far as those institutions are where they are, will simply be wasting our time. On the other point is that there is a resurgent interest in Africa by nations of the world. Today we are in Japan, Russia, China, and I have learned that Qatar and Turkey are planning to invite us to come and discuss. I think we need to understand that the urgent love and interest in Africa is about themselves, not about us. So the issue before us is how do we utilize this new opportunity for our own self? If we are invited, we need to go with a workable agenda. If you go to Russia and you are signing with a Russian government for 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers of railway, there is an African proverb that says, if someone is giving you something, you look at what he has. Is that feasible? Is that possible? So I think if we are to make good use of this new interest in Africa, we should also key it to AfCFTA. We need to come, despite the fact that we are a continent of countries, we still have our own individual peculiarities and interests. But this is important that before we attend any meeting being called by any country, there's first of all the need for the leaders to meet within themselves. Now come out with a position that this is what we actually want. If we are not careful, nations like Tahiti we'll start inviting all of us. Then we go there, we sit down, the televisions are there for 2-3 days, and then we come back, and nothing changed. It is a shame to see as a continent today, thousands of our people are crossing the Sahara to Libya and drowning in the Mediterranean Sea. Their attempt to search for greener pasture in Europe. I don't know what the African Union is doing, but I've seen the EU having more interest in this issue because they are at the receiving end of these people. So let us save a date. Meeting in Japan, in Brazil. Let African leaders at least try to summon the courage to meet in Libya and address the problem of these thousands of our young people that have a lot to deliver to our country. And I believe